Welcome to a new edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. I'm Greg Pickel. Ryan Snyder is to my right if you're watching us on YouTube, and if not, you'll hear his voice soon. But it's a big day for us at Blue White Illustrated. So we have a big guest, Charles Power from On3. Blue White Illustrated is now a part of the On3 network. You can visit us bluewhiteillustrated.com. Sign up for just $1 for the entire year right on the homepage. Charles, thanks for joining us. Welcome to the podcast, and we're looking forward to getting to work with you. How are you today? And what is the thing that Penn State fans have to look forward to now that On3 is and Blue White Illustrated are partners?
Yeah, man, we're pretty excited about it. Glad to have you all on with On3. I think the thing that Penn State fans will probably be the most excited about is our recruiting database, like our player database. In terms of the information I think we'll have, we started to roll it out in the last week or so. It's definitely in its infancy, but like our plan for kind of rolling this out over the course of the next year is a pretty robust one, and I think there's a lot to be excited about there with like a lot of the products we have planned, the designs, and you can kind of get a peek of it right now, but we're obviously going to keep working on it and adding to it. There's a lot of different elements. There's a player element. Obviously recruiting. We have a tab strictly for the recruiting with kind of a unique visit center that tracks prospect visits over the course of their recruitment and kind of breaks that down. We have a scouting tab, which is kind of more of an in-depth scouting piece that will eventually fold into draft. NFL draft for guys that are prospects in that. And then of course we're going to have like a bunch of like different pages and products that have cross references. Back to recruiting, we have a product called RPM, Recruiting Prediction Machine, which kind of has some unique like machine learning stuff that's factored into expert predictions. So there's a lot of fun products. For anybody that's a recruiting nerd like me, or I'm sure y'all
like all of us. Yeah,
kind of get the nitty gritty on this stuff. Like there's like, it's designed by people who like kind of live and breathe recruiting and kind of understand in just the whole player arc of their development and stuff. And it's not just recruiting. Like we kind of operate it like from this is like recruiting is kind of the genesis of a player's career really. And then we're going to track them all the way to the pros. So, I'm really excited about it. Like we started working on this stuff like, months ago, and like the more and more you look at it, you're like, wow, this is like pretty good stuff. So I think we're going to take it to another level. It's just, I think we're trying to be patient and kind of rolling it out and building it over the next year. But I'm obviously pretty excited about it. So looking forward to it.
I can't hear you, Greg.
There we go. Little technical difficulty. Why not? Charles is the director of scouting and rankings for On3 at on3.com. He's worked previously at 24/7. He started the National Scouting Service. He's been a little bit everywhere, covering recruiting, covering prospects, covering the recruiting scene. So let's get into it here for a little bit first. Charles, from the moment On3 launched back in the summer until now, there's been a lot of progress. There's rankings out now. The database is coming along. Let's just start, I guess, with, and Ryan, I'm going to go a little bit off script here, but let's just start a little bit with kind of where things are at this point as we sit here on November 2nd, just in terms of the rankings and the recruiting database and the profiles and things like that. Where are you guys at this point, and what should fans be really looking for?
Yeah, so with the profiles, most of the recruiting information we kind of have in, we're adding a scouting element to it. You kind of go on like the top prospects for the class of 2022. They have what we call like scouting summaries. So that's going to be kind of like the elevator pitch on them as a prospect. Like, if you've never seen Nick Singleton play, you could pull that up and within a couple sentences kind of figure out like the nuts and bolts of him as a prospect. And then we're going to have like a scouting journal, which is kind of documents over the course of their career, entries we have on them. It could be like a game, it could be seeing them at a camp, it could be if they had an injury, just kind of tracks, kind of curates the the progression of our evaluation of them over the course of their life as a prospect. So that's an element as well. We're obviously going to have data like testing data, track data, size, speed measurables. We call those like vitals. So we'll have all of that, but like that's kind of in the process of being rolled out. So there's a lot of stuff. I mean, it's kind of we tried to think of anything you want to know about a prospect, at least in terms of like the evaluation scouting piece to have on that page. So that's kind of where we're at with that. In terms of the rankings, we have like what we call it the On 300. It's top 300 for the 22 and 23 cycles. We're working on a 24 top 100 watch list, which that won't be ordered 1 to 100. It'll just be 100 prospects from the class of 2024 who will all be like 4 stars, probably low 4 stars. To me, I just don't really like believe in like ranking those guys 1 to 100 because just from like a sample size, it's tough to really parse those, and you kind of just sets things up to be a little messy down the line. So, but yeah, we're in, I think we're in the process of, putting grades on the majority of the class of 2022. I think almost all the Power 5 commits, like probably like 95 to 100% of them have grades, and then we're moving on to a group of 5 and uncommitted prospects, obviously. So that's kind of where we're at with the rankings. And yeah, I think we'll have most of that stuff done obviously in the next couple weeks.
So one thing I want to get into real quick before we switch to like specific kids is the difference between the consensus and at On3 compared to 247, and it's kind of, is it weighted by the average size of all the classes? And that's one thing I've just had a lot of fans asking me about. I was wondering if you can kind of hit on that, and I assume it just as more kids commit, it grows more, and that's kind of how it's all weighted.
Yeah. So this is something I'm pretty proud of our consensus ratings and rankings formula. So if you kind of think about team recruiting rankings every year, we kind of see the same thing every year with kind of other formulas with this, where you see a team that is elevated really highly and it might not be sustainable. Like they might just have a bunch of commits early, have a top 5 class, and that's not something that everybody's like, well, once these other schools that have higher recruit averages have higher commit averages.
Which, to cut you off real quick, that was Penn State for the last like couple months. You know what I mean? Like that's exactly what, everybody was typing up Penn State's #1 class, but we knew that wasn't sustainable, just because of how many 5 stars were left and a bunch of guys were going to go to Georgia and Clemson and Alabama. So I think it's just important to note that because we talk about that all the time on our page. But go ahead. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah. So that's a perfect example. So like this kind of doing it this way creates really a real-time projection, and it kind of paces for throughout the cycle. So just, I guess, to kind of explain it. So it's based off the recruit average, and if this is the only one that averages all 4 major media services evenly, which I think is an important point. And so it averages those 4 evenly, and it, in terms of the number of how it's weighted in terms of the number of commits, we take basically the average of Power 5 classes at that time, and that's kind of the pace that we use to weight it basically. So so if you have like if we get to December and a school has a high average and has 14 commits, and the average Power 5 class is 18, like they'll be assessed a small penalty, because you just can't sign 14 commits and have like and have a high average, and like that's going to ultimately affect your class. So we factored in like a small penalty for schools that sign less, but this is done with the assumption that most schools do sign close to a full class. Class sizes fluctuate a little bit now with teams like saving scholarships for the transfer portal, so we didn't want to we felt like it was necessary to kind of be fluid in how you in terms of the class side instead of locking into a certain number, because that kind of fluctuates every year. Like I think last year across college football, we saw the lowest amount of high school signees ever because teams are holding open scholarships for transfers. So I'm pretty excited about this. I think it'll be a very or at least the most accurate real-time projection of what a recruiting class is pacing towards. Because typically, especially when you get later in the cycle, schools with the highest average, I feel like that's the fans who really know how to track this. Like that's kind of what they go to first. So I think making that a key component of this, kind of gives us the best team rankings that are out there. So I'm pretty excited about this. When we put this together, this is something I was kind of proud of our team working on. So
was that you, Charles? Was that your idea?
I mean, I
about
definitely contributed to it, but some of this math is way over my head. So the heavy lifting, I can't take credit for any of that.
Yeah, we're all journalists here, so nobody here knows how to do math.
Yeah, this is not a numbers podcast unless we're talking about rankings. And before we get into one of Penn State's most highly rated and decorated commits, let me just follow up on one point you just made there. What else, when people come to On3, when people come to Blue White Illustrated, you mentioned that it's the only rankings out there that average all four equally. What else can people look for from just On3 that's going to set On3, Blue White Illustrated's recruiting coverage apart?
Yeah, I think the products within the database are going to be unique. I think the recruiting prediction machine, which is the prediction element on kind of forecasting where recruits, where prospects we think they're going to go. I think that's going to be definitely pretty unique for that kind of product. I think the visit center on the profiles is unique as well. It kind of creates, I think people who follow recruiting, we always kind of say follow the visits, especially now that prospects can get back on campus. I mean, I know the 2021 cycle was pretty weird with that for sure, because they couldn't, I guess they couldn't take guided visits or whatever. But so I think that following visits is highly predictive, and I think the way we have that laid out is very functional, easy to follow, and kind of cuts through the noise there. I think some of the products on our database, we're going to have a bunch of historic data that's kind of laid out in a way where you can follow trends. You could say Penn State's recruiting a defensive end from Delaware. They have a pretty high success rate. We're going to have stuff that can kind of point specifically within situations and kind of show you historical trends, trend lines and stuff like that. And having coach pages of all the prospects they've signed. And then I think we're going to, eventually fold in NFL draft stuff with this as well. So, you look at a player's page and it'll start with their high school, go to college and then go to draft. And the draft element is really kind of something I think that, kind of looking at this thing from a complete career arc will probably separate ours a little bit as well. It's not just recruiting.
Yeah, the state databases are the one thing that I'm super excited about. You mentioned Delaware DN. I mean, that's denied Dennis Sutton. We can use as a comparison, right? And he's at McDonough. And McDonough has sent how many kids to Penn State now? Devon Ellies, right. PJ Mustafer. And so basically fans are going to go, you're going to be able to search McDonough and you're going to find all the players who have left McDonough and you're going to see a ton go to Penn State. And then you're going to know their average star rating at McDonough. You're going to know the other schools that have had success at McDonough. And we're just going to be able to find different ways, for fans to really just to do a deep dive and find the schools that are producing the most talent, and then also the states that are producing the most talent. So we're going to know, it's common sense, right? That Florida, Texas, California, they've always been the top states for talent, right? But now we're really going to know, well, where's Pennsylvania in that mix? A lot of people have always talked at PA being, 6, 7 behind a couple other schools. Well, now we're really going to get a feel for where they rank. So that's just from my perspective. And when I was going through this process, that was something I was super excited about. But let's get into a couple player ratings real quick. You've done a great job with this. I think you guys had Drew Allar as the number 1 quarterback in the country. 247 has since done that as well. And you used to work for 247. So we have a lot of crossover with On3 and some things that I think we see things similarly, I guess you would say. But just with Drew, why is he the number one quarterback in the country to you? I got to see him up close against Stowe Monroe Falls this year. Incredible game, like 400 yards passing. I think it was like a career high, basically. But just what stands out to you about Drew, and why is he number one in the country?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think he made a very strong case to be the number one quarterback in the country, coming off of just seeing him throw in person at the Elite 11. I think the first thing is just his arm talent. I would probably say, just overall arm talent, not just arm strength, but his ability to have a variety of throws, throw from different platforms, throw with accuracy, layer the football. I think he probably is the top arm talent that I've seen in the 2022 cycle. So you kind of start there. Obviously he's a big framed kid. He has, great stature. But to me, like what really has kind of separated him this fall is he's kind of translating those physical traits onto the field. Like, I mean, he's having a great senior season, and this is a school that's not like a traditional power. Like, I guess they're, undefeated, regular season, putting up really good numbers. I think when you watch him play as well, just the fact that he can kind of make these second reaction plays, small window throws, really, like, I think the term I used to kind of describe his arm, he's got like a really like pliable arm, can throw from different arm slots, arm angles. Has a kind of a unique skill set in terms of just how he is as a passer. Probably the biggest question with him would be like long term, if you're projecting like towards the NFL draft. I don't see this affecting him a ton in college, but just would be like he's a good athlete, not an elite athlete. He can pick up like yards on the ground, and I think it's helpful too that they kind of employ him a little bit as a design runner. In those empty sets that they run a lot at his high school. So, I mean, it's a weird year with a weird cycle with quarterback recruiting. Obviously, I think everybody kind of had Quinn Ewers tabbed as the number one guy going into the season. But physically, like Drew Allar is probably more talented as a passer, like just arm talent, I guess, than Ewers. But Ewers was so accomplished at the high school level, playing top competition in Texas, a guy we've known about for a while. But I mean, Allar is a guy who definitely has like a ton of upside. I think we're seeing him continue to ascend as a senior, which, just doing this, like I think it's something that one of my biggest like just overall philosophies with evaluating high school prospects is you want players who are getting better and better as a senior. It's something I think that the senior year doesn't always, line up perfectly with recruiting. Schools have to make evaluations really early. A lot of times they're evaluating these prospects when they're in 10th grade, and you see guys who get way, way better. Like, like generally speaking, like we don't really know exactly how good these guys are until they're seniors. And a lot of times they're already committed. So I think the fact that Drew Allar is playing so well as a senior has to be very encouraging. If you're Penn State, and I'm excited. I know they're getting into the playoffs. I'm excited to kind of seeing how deep they can go. Like they're going to probably be playing some really good teams. So, I mean, he's right now. I think he's, certainly he's our number one quarterback, and we'll kind of see how it shakes out. We'll see all those guys in all-star games and in the playoffs. And I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how it shakes out. But I think he's done enough to put himself, in the number one spot so far.
This
Awesome.
is the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. I'm Greg Pickel, joined by, of course, my usual partner in crime, Ryan Snyder, and we have the Director of Scouting and Rankings with us from our On3, Charles Power, with us. Remember, Blue White Illustrated is now a part of the On3 network. Join us at bluewhiteillustrated.com, where we have a special $1 for an entire year promotion going on right now. Get that more Penn State recruiting news, national recruiting news, and, of course, college football coverage at bluewhiteillustrated.com. Charles, moving to another player that you guys are higher on in Penn State's class than maybe most is Nick Singleton. Obviously, everyone has him as one of the top running backs, but at On3, he's number one. What puts him ahead of LSU commit Trevante Citizen or Georgia commit Branson Robinson or some other guys across the country who I think are all maybe a piece of that conversation, but at On3, it's Singleton is the number one. What's the main reason for that?
Yeah, I think that Nick Singleton, I would say, is, from what I've seen, just as an overall player, is probably the most explosive running back in this cycle. Like, you watch him, you flip on his senior video, and like, that's just the word that comes to mind. This guy's like very explosive. He is powerful, well built. He has track speed with documented sub 11 second times in the 100 meters. Just an overall great athlete, but it's not just like a sprinter. Like, this is a powerful, functional running back who is completely dominating his competition in Pennsylvania. I think I'm sure y'all probably are more up to date on his stats than me, but I think when I looked at it, he was averaging like around 15 yards a carry, and just mowing through defenses, and so I think you look at that. I mean, I always start with running backs. I start with production, speed, and frame, and he checks the boxes on all of those. Then you kind of look at his running style. He's kind of a violent runner, downhill runner, but he can change directions as well. Powerful, runs through arm tackles at the second level. Just a lot to like there. I think he's also, correct me if I'm wrong, I think he's also played a little defense. They thrown the ball a little bit. So I think he was in the mix to be the number one running back entering the senior season, and I think he's having probably pretty comfortably the best senior season of all of those guys he's in the mix with. And you factor in his physical traits, and I think to me he's kind of separated himself as the number one back so far, and he'll certainly be one that's kind of in the 5-star conversation. Before it's all said and done, like I would have a hard time seeing him not being heavily in the mix there.
Awesome, man. And he's also an awesome kid too. Like, that's the one thing I stress to people. It's just like an awesome leader, great in the classroom. Like, there's a lot of other things aside from just being an awesome player about Nick that fans are going to love. So that's just something to keep in mind. But I want to hit on two last guys quick before we let you go. Some guys that are a little different with On3 in Penn State's committed class compared to 247 and rivals. And one of them is Cam Miller. He's a 4-star. It's a 247, I believe, and a 3-star. With rivals. Cam's like a really quiet kid. He's one of those guys I've struggled to really get to know. I'm not sure how much you guys have seen him, or if you've even done the evaluation on him. Maybe somebody else in the network did, but have you seen him much? Cornerback from Trinity Christian. He's playing a little bit of everything for them. Have you seen Cam much?
Yeah, he first kind of jumped on my radar. He had some good testing numbers, like right around early. I think it was like a camp like right before COVID, like in 2020. At what I think it was like at the UC Report combine in Jacksonville. So he kind of jumped on my radar there. I think the first thing was when he was at Fernandina Beach prior to transferring to Trinity, he played quarterback, and that's one thing. Like, if you look at top corners, like defensive back, safety corners, draft picks, you really like guys that play on offense, because a lot of times it's like a best athlete situation. They're functionally athletic, can do a lot of different things. So I like the fact that he played quarterback, and then you could watch him play QB and say, okay, like, obviously he kind of projects a little bit as a DB. And then since transferring to Trinity Christian, we've seen that more. I just think he's just kind of a natural athlete, good feet, can redirect, obviously showed the athleticism in the combine setting, and then as a quarterback as well. So he's one that I've always been a little higher on than everybody else, it seems. And he's going up against a good competition at Trinity. He's probably kind of making the transition into being a full-time DB. And so he's, getting his technique down and stuff like that. So, I mean, I think just the athleticism, and I think I've always been a little higher on his athleticism, and kind of just, he's maybe a little more of a projection, at least was early, less so now that he's playing full-time DB at Trinity. So, but he's one I definitely like.
Well, one thing I was going to add there, one thing I was going to add there quick, Greg, is he ran a high 4.5 and had a 4.2 shuttle at that camp. And that was, 2 years ago. And, guys continue to progress and stuff. So, I mean, realistically, he could probably be a sub 4.2 now, and, probably has that 40 down, a little bit closer to, low 4.5 or something like that. So go ahead.
Yeah. I would say too, at those camps, like, that's one thing we have to, maybe the fans won't know, but like, there's different timing devices at these camps. And so like the camp that he ran a 4.5, a 4.58, I think it was, that is an electronic time, and it's a laser start, laser finish. It's actually probably a more rigorous timing method than like the NFL Combine. The NFL Combine, I think, is a hand start, laser finish, and this is a laser start, laser finish. And so just to kind of, compare if you're running a sub 4.7 at those camps, like that's very fast. Like the fastest players in the country, I haven't seen a time really faster, I don't think, than a mid 4.4. So a 4.58 is very fast at those camps.
Awesome. Very good. And then, so if Cam Miller's maybe the guy who some see as underrated, obviously you guys don't, but maybe not the highest rated guy, but could have a high impact on Penn State quickly. If Cam Miller's that guy's on defense, I think a lot of people feel like it could be Tyler Johnson on offense, a receiver out of Virginia who visited Penn State numerous times over the summer and then ended up committing to the Nittany Lions during that pretty gigantic stretch run there in June, July that has made up most of this Penn State class of 2022. He's a 4-star on 3-star elsewhere. Why are you guys so high on him? And is there any similarities to be drawn in terms of what you just talked about with Miller's speed on the Tyler Johnson side of things?
Yeah, I think I'm kind of interested to see where he ends up elsewhere too, because Virginia kind of had a weird deal where they didn't have a fall season, and it got pushed to the spring. So we kind of had the advantage when we were putting this together of factoring in spring seasons, and he had a great spring season. I guess in what would be his junior year officially. I think he had like 13 touchdowns in 4 games. Like you can kind of see on the video there, just does a lot of different things. A guy who could probably line up outside or in the slot, hand the ball off to him, just an overall athlete, just a really good football player, who is kind of a dominant guy. If he had 13 touchdowns in 4 games, is well over 3 touchdowns a game, and does it a lot of different ways. As you can see there, plays on both sides of the ball. So I just liked his overall playmaking ability, and just it's kind of hard to deny the production in the video he put on as a junior. So I think the fact that he did that kind of in the middle of the spring, a little under the radar in Virginia with their schedule, I think that might have played into it. And we kind of had the advantage of factoring that into our initial ranking. So we'll see if others catch up there. But I just thought he had a great year.
Mm-hmm. Awesome, man. Well, anybody else? I don't know. Maybe we're putting you on the spot here. Is there anybody else in the class that kind of stands out to you? I mean, I know you have to deal with a ton of kids between Denai, Dennis Sutton, Caden Saunders. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I was gonna say I recently, kind of looked at like the 2 junior college guys, the 2 Lackawanna guys, and kind of working on the JUCO rankings. I'm sure y'all know very well, like Penn State's got a pretty good success rate at Lackawanna. Think about Jaquan Brisker. So they're kind of tied in there. I think, JB Nelson and Tyrese Mills are both good gets there. And I think it's very, like, that's just a smart recruiting strategy for Penn State. Like this, they obviously aren't a program that's going to rely super heavily on the junior college guys. But, you think about Lackawanna's in your backyard, you have a good relationship with the staff. You can get guys who, like, a lot of Lackawanna's roster are players from the area, at least like kind of the mid-Atlantic area. So you aren't really recruiting guys from California, so they're familiar with Penn State. So I think those 2 jump out. I'm trying to think who. Abdul Carter was one who was a riser for us as a senior. Ryan, I talked to you about him. Like, just the athleticism. This guy can fly, and he's big, striker. I think seeing him as a senior kind of shed some light on how talented he is, and the guy who really obviously runs well. Like, I think he's just fun to watch with his striking ability and how quickly he closes, and kind of just a violent linebacker. And I know you all have seen a lot of those guys at Penn State, and he seems kind of to fit the mold there. So he would be another one that I would be pretty excited about.
Yeah, with him, it's just whether he grows into a DN. He's so big, you know what I mean? Like, I just saw him play McDonough a couple weeks ago, and that's the whole thing. But he had, a legit like mid 4.55 40. That's hand timed, of course, but the guy can really move. So awesome.
Yeah, and he plays that fast too, for sure.
Charles, anything you want to pitch? Anything fans should be looking for at On3 Sports and On3 Recruiting before we get you out of here?
Yeah, I would just just hang with us. Like I think we're gonna, as we continue to roll out the database, I would just get in the database and snoop around. And I think once as we continue to roll out the different products, I think that it'll definitely be something that fans like. You can follow us obviously on on3.com, on all the social media stuff. I think we have a lot of stuff going on there as well. But yeah, I would just stay tuned to On3.
On3
it's going to be awesome.
Is the Twitter handle at On3 Sports. There's also at On3 Recruits, which is where you're going to find a lot of the stuff from Charles and his team. Charles is on Twitter too. Give him a follow at Charles Power, as Blue White Illustrated and On3 team up to continue covering, of course, Penn State football here, and you'll get all the national and other news you need to know from the team at On3 Recruits and On3 Sports. Charles, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it.
All right, that's been another edition of the Blue White Illustrated Penn State Recruiting Podcast. For Ryan Snyder, I'm Greg Pickel. Don't forget, check us out, BlueWhiteIllustrated.com, where you can sign up for On3 today. We will catch you next time.